Okay, the third episode of Manifold Solutions podcast. Welcome. Great honor to have Pirita Paajanen, doctor and docent. A docent is not a term used in UK,
No,
no, but in Finland that is a very high qualification after PhD, like habilitation in.
habilitation in Germany or Doctor of Science in the UK. In some universities might correspond to this.
Okay. And currently you are a senior bioinformatician at the John Innes Center. Where is that in?
So John Innes Center is in Norwich. It's part of the Norwich Research Park. We have lots of biosciences institutes there. And John Innes is a world-leading center of plant research.
Right. And you're also a docent of plant genomics at the University of Helsinki, and you are also a researcher at the Center of Excellence in Tree Biology.
That's right.
Okay. So my memory is that I attended your course on group theory in probably 2011 or something like that. And it is, by the way, group theory and algebra is not my specialty, but that was one of the most memorable courses that I had in my mathematics career. And now I somehow missed completely your transition from abstract algebra and pure mathematics to plant science and bioinformatics, and which happened around 2015.
Yeah, starting from 2013 and then
Okay, already.
gradually getting deeper and deeper.
Right. By the way, there's other things about Pirita dissertation prize in 2006, right? Did you defend your PhD in Finland?
So I did my PhD or DPhil, Doctor of Philosophy in Oxford.
In Oxford University, right.
Because there was absolutely no research in algebra or group theory in Finland. Finnish mathematics is very analysis heavy traditionally.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And so you wanted to do algebra already since your master's?
Well, I did my undergraduate in Oxford as well.
Okay. So you went there.
Yeah, and then I did masters in Cambridge and then went back to Oxford for DPhil. And because Oxford was picking group theory as an undergraduate, we had more group theory than many other undergraduate degrees.
Yeah. Also, Jokke Hässä went to
He was in
Imperial College doing also algebra.
Yeah, and Johanna Ramö,
right.
Similar time went to Queen Mary University of London to do group theory.
Yeah, Jokke Hässä is coming up to the podcast also next month. Okay, so I mean, I'd like to speak maybe just a little bit about group theory and symmetry, and I mean, you probably have. It's something that outside of mathematics, people, of course, know about symmetries, and they have a vague idea that mathematicians study it, but then the actual study of symmetries, which we call group theory and abstract algebra, is it's considered very advanced. It is not taught in high schools. Can you put in, I don't know, several sentences, what is the study of symmetry that you did?
Well, of course, the normal symmetry studies start at primary school. Children are looking at is a butterfly symmetric. It has symmetry axes. They are also looking whether a triangle is symmetric, and they find out that if it's isosceles triangle, then it has more symmetries than just the axis. There's also rotational symmetries. And when you get to more symmetries than just this rotational or reflective, you can go into tiling patterns. Like if I'm looking at your floor here, which is a normal parquet floor, I'm pretty sure I could find a symmetry. It probably is one of those wallpaper group symmetries. But then there are tilings that are not symmetric. So during the time I was giving the group theory course, the tiling of Keskuskatu was being developed. And I walked through this place once a week to my choir practice. And by this time, by professional expertise, I had developed an ability to see what the wallpaper patterns were. Like, okay, this is Z2 semi-direct product S3, or this is Z2 something something, and I could usually see it in my corner of eyes. This is what it is. And this one I walked past week after week, and I couldn't figure out what was the symmetry. But then I was extremely happy sometime later to read in the newspaper that it was a Penrose tiling.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, and the Penrose tiling, I have also another anecdote. So I was in Oxford, and Penrose was in Oxford. And one day there was a man sitting on the floor doing a puzzle. And I was kind of puzzled. Why was there a man sitting on the floor in an office doing a puzzle? And I hadn't figured out at that point that he was Penrose.
Wow.
And it was only later that I realized that, this is Roger Penrose.
Wow.
He was probably doing a Penrose tiling in his office. So for these Penrose tilings, you can't find symmetries. They are going up to infinity, and there is no fixed point that you can rotate it or reflect it so that it looks exactly the same.
I believe there's one point.
About where you start.
Yeah. Yes, it's so-called quasi-symmetric. So you can find arbitrarily large patches which looks the same, but when you try to continue them, then the symmetry breaks always. Yeah. It was an amazing achievement in 20th century, even though people obviously been studying tilings for forever, for thousands of years. But this tiling was for the first time invented in the 50s by Roger Penrose. And we're still kind of active. He's very old, but he's very sharp, and it's a very interesting anecdote because I think it shows how mathematicians are playful.
Yeah.
How they are still until like he was probably 80 something when you saw him on the floor, maybe 70.
70s, yeah.
And so until the end of mathematicians' lives, they are like children, excited about the mathematical puzzles, and that's very...
Well, Brian Birch had retired ages ago, and he still came to seminars.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, this place, Oxford and Cambridge, they're so full of these famous people, unlike our... also have some. Okay. Okay, so you have are you still active in pure math and group theory at all, or?
Not particularly. I mean, quite randomly, I got a grant review on pure mathematics a few years ago to my John Innes address. But apart from that, not really.
Okay.
I mean, of course, I happily talk about mathematics if it comes up, but not in the pure context.
Right. So how does this transition happen? So now you're working in genomics, biosynthesis. I tried to skim through your publications. I used ChatGPT to rewrite one of your abstracts in layman's terms. And I figured that one of the recent papers was about this. So there's some plant which is used as insurance crop, meaning that it's grown as a
drought tolerance.
So some plant which is going to be used as insurance if other crops fail, basically. Let's say in some very dry regions, and it's resistant to drought and other things. But there was a problem that it has kind of poisonous properties, so it can people who eat it can develop neural laterism.
Yeah, so neurotoxicity.
Neurotoxicity, and you figured out how this is brought up by the enzymes and the genome of that plant?
So for this paper, I had a relatively minor role. So I was working on the assembly and looking how does the genome look like. So genome assemblies and genomics is kind of attractive to algebraists because they are discrete type mathematics, because they are looking at DNA sequences, and these are the sequences of letters.
Yeah.
Nucleotides A, C, T, and G. And they can be in, it's the combinations of them that makes a DNA and makes human, a plant. And there's a big industry of figuring out what the DNA sequence of an organism is. So in the 90s, there was the Human Genome Project, which decoded the whole human genome, 3 billion base pairs. And this was multinational, several labs, 10-year project, and extremely laborious. And of course, at that point, when they said we have a human genome, it was nowhere near complete. It had gaps, it had rearrangement, it had problems. There were certain areas that could not be assembled at all because they are repeats. So if you have the same 5 nucleotides, so 1,000 nucleotides, and then another 1,000, getting the repeat assembled is incredibly difficult because the length of your sequence is finite. So
can you explain getting the
I can explain more.
Yeah.
So that was done kind of old technology using BACs, and I think their sequences were probably up to 10,000 to 100,000 bases.
So this means that out of the billions long genome, they would have these patches, and they don't know where they came from.
Yeah, and then they try to puzzle it together.
Right, that's the challenge.
That's a challenge. And it was difficult and laborious. And then there was a next generation of sequencing, which was high throughput. So you could get lots of sequences pretty easily, but those were only 150 base pairs long. So if you have an organism which is 3 billion bases or even 120 million bases, and your sequence length is 100 or 150, it's a massive puzzle.
Yeah.
And the computational biology ideas of graph theory come into how to assemble these.
So
but then if you think about the repeat of 1,000 and you have 150 base pair sequences, it's impossible to know where they go.
Yeah, so there is one question is whether it's possible at all, right? So sometimes it's impossible, or you have multiple solutions, and you might use some other heuristics to choose one of them, like they do in inverse problems a lot. And then another question, even if it's possible, then how to do it, right? So what is the computational complexity,
and how efficiently to do it.
Right. Okay, so you've been involved in those questions also?
Yes, so those were some of the first problems that I started from in plant biology.
Wow, that's really sounds like a very natural transition from mathematics or algebra to this kind of more applied world.
In no time have I been in a lab working on enzymes or figuring out anything of those.
Yeah. And so what I'm curious about, how did this transition happen? So were you intentional about it? Did you want to go to another area, more applied? Or did it happen somehow organically? Did someone contact you from these biology departments, or what happened? How did it look like?
So no one would contact from biology department to a mathematician, because
we have to change that.
There's no communication. Like, mathematicians don't know biology and biologists don't know mathematics.
This is why we're having this podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So how did it happen? So after I had academy postdoc fellowship in algebra in Helsinki, and then I was working in pure group theory, But my last paper from that project is actually communications theory, which is already applied. But I was applying group theory into information theory.
Okay.
And then the next step was that I had a friend in Helsinki who was talking about genomics, and he was in the computational computer science department. And I think from that, the sort of first idea was, oh, that looks like an interesting system. And especially genomics, because it's all about sequences. And then I just essentially took the jobs.ac.uk, and which lists all the academic jobs, and started applying for jobs in UK in this area. And I did apply for even pre-doc positions, because I knew that I didn't have the expertise or experience. And then there was one position which said group theory PhD as a requirement, which was a total coincidence. It turned out later that it was there because they needed to advertise the position in order to get the visa for someone who had group theory PhD. And the description was so narrow that they thought no one else would apply.
And little did they know.
And then I applied, and I wrote an application, and it happened that this person had done mathematics as a first degree as well, and could recognize that. He said that my precise thinking skills were the thing that impressed him.
Wow.
And this lab was working bioinformatics in all sorts of organisms. So I got the job for half a year.
Okay.
Which was the first stepping stone into bioinformatics.
So how did he saw that you had precise thinking skills? He just saw your publication record, or somehow in the interview, or?
So there was I wrote quite a lengthy motivational letter.
Okay.
And I think I touched the right things there without knowing that these were the right things to touch. But I really showed my motivation in this letter, and I was really keen, and I think it shone true. And then I was asked to come and give a talk, and I talked about group theory and showed symmetries of with little cubes, trying to think where I could use my group theory things, and trees and their symmetry properties, because phylogenetic or recombination trees are a thing that is studied in that sort of computational biology. And then just discussing, he gave me a paper, and I read it, and then we discussed about the paper and the sort of questions I was asking, like how does this work? Is this really so? Have I understood this point correctly?
These are the things that are great strengths of mathematicians, and no one knows about it. The people outside mathematics don't know about it, and the mathematicians themselves don't know about it either, because they are in that world, so for them it's normal.
Yeah.
And they even feel inferior all the time because they're dealing with people like Roger Penrose, let's say, and so they're like thinking of themselves very lowly. And this is something that one has to be able to market to these things. I think it is telling that when I asked you, did they contact you? And I doubted it, and you said, of course not. That's telling about the situation. There's no communication. But when people go to study mathematics, this is the dream. The idea that mathematics is the kind of key to other sciences is very inspiring and motivating. And that's the idea we get when we read about Albert Einstein or other stories. It feels like mathematics is this amazing power, but when you become a PhD in mathematics, you're kind of cut out from the rest of the world. So your story is really, really inspiring in that respect.
And I hadn't really thought about precise thinking skills as a skill.
Right.
And over the years, I have held on to this phrase because it is absolutely true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And okay, so you had this half year job, and pretty quickly you got this position where you're now.
No, so
Or
then that job involved commuting, and that was far too far. And then I needed to find a job closer by. And again, I applied for several things, and people told me that, well, we don't need a pure mathematician here. I mean, this is someone with whom I submitted a paper yesterday, and we've come to a conclusion that pure mathematics skills are sometimes useful. But it has taken several years to come to a conclusion that.
so what are the other skills? So imagine you, with all the wisdom you have now, you were applying for this job again 10 years ago.
Mhm.
What would you say? What are how would you market yourself to this biologists?
Well, I got this job without, the first job without programming skills,
Okay.
which is quite remarkable. Of course, the condition was that I start programming the day one. So I started learning Python.
And were
immediately.
they impressed how fast you learned it?
Well, it was a group of computational biologists who had been programmed forever, so I think they were not impressed, but
When they saw that you started from zero?
well, I could do things quite quickly.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
Yeah, so I could start contributing towards a paper after about 3 months.
Okay.
And this led to my first biology paper, which was actually in human genomics, ancient human DNA research.
So what are the other skills besides precise thinking that you could try to explain why to hire a pure mathematician in such a job?
So the second good skill I have is very difficult to explain to others because it is being able to visualize abstract things in my head. So if you give me data, I don't have to plot it. I have a feeling that this is exponential or this is linear, or like I can see a few data points and I extrapolate and it's usually correct. But this is difficult to explain because it's kind of the intuition for data, or this looks like noisy data.
Yeah.
And then in order to communicate it, you have to go to plot it in various different ways in sort of less satisfactory way than your multidimensional plotting in your head.
Very cool. Okay, that sounds very cool. Now let's explore this. Does that require first to how much do you have to learn about the actual data science before you can apply this intuition?
So I think this partly the skill comes from the algebra, because I was working on multidimensional groups that didn't have, like you had to develop your own abstract visualization of them. Like there's no way of communicating them apart from equations in the paper, but there's still something in your mind that you can see them rotating or doing. Of course, with data science, so I do bioinformatics. I think I'm moving more into data science currently. There is this stage. So when you're searching for a proof in algebra, you have usually a toy example that you sort of play around and look at their properties. And with data science, it's the same. It's a sort of exploratory data analysis that you just play around with the data and try to figure out what are the patterns and what could be there, rather than going directly into this is the standard procedure, what do I get out?
So for you, there is an analogy or similarity between playing around with the data and finding out the results to looking for proofs in algebra.
Yeah.
And because you're very, very skilled in that, and that is something that we do entirely in our head. And this is why you are able to think about the data a lot more in your head without programming and without having to plot it many times, unlike someone who only studied data science.
Possibly,
Usually.
because data scientists are learning procedures that you do k-means clustering, or you do PCA, or you do that.
That's what
Like
they are
you
trained.
Yeah, you first reduce the data to something, while I get my hands dirty with the raw data.
Right. So how do you you start manipulating it? I mean, you have to somehow. How are you looking at the data to get that feeling about it?
So of course the data sets are large or even huge.
Yeah.
So one does need a computer to look
Sure.
at that. But it's the looking at particular examples and generalizing those particular examples. Are there patterns?
Interesting.
So there's one data science project I'm involved with is looking at circadian clock. So circadian clock in humans is noticeable for people when they get jet lag. So you go to a different time zone and your body clock is not aligned to the sunset and sunrise, and it takes a few days to adjust. So there are the sort of sine wave patterns in certain cellular processes inside your body that just go 24-hour cycle. And it happens also in plants. They have these 24-hour cycles of certain patterns in the cellular, like protein levels fluctuate and transcript levels fluctuate, and you can measure these.
So plants get jet lagged if you move them?
Yes. So for instance, it could happen that with climate change, the climate in Finland is getting warmer, and you think, okay, I'll take a wheat variety from Ukraine or Poland and start growing in Finland because it's adjusted to warmer climate, but it's also adjusted to a different solar time. So because the circadian time adaptation of that wheat variety might be adapted to further south, it might not perform well in Finland because it's expecting sunrise and sunset at different time, and this controls the growth of the plant.
Wow.
So yes, I think plants would get jet lagged. And also sometimes it happens that you take seeds from a plant that has grown in a different circadian time. They don't grow so well.
Wow. Okay, so it's like genetic.
It is genetic, yeah. So for instance, in this project, I had circadian time for 30,000 different transcripts. So transcript is like transcript is the same as gene. So this plant has 32,000 genes, which are all doing their own thing.
Right.
And some of them are circadian, some of them are not. And figuring out first, okay, do I have good circadian time? Did the experiment work? How does it differ? Are there sort of things that peak in the morning? Are there things that peak in the evening? There are known examples that are supposed to work in a certain way in a lab, but this data was in the field, and in the field you have lots of conditions. You have temperature, natural light, and everything changes all the time. But it is amazing how robust the circadian clock is still in the field. And for this project, I'm developing a whole framework at looking at these things. And starting to actually see that for mathematician, a concept of isomorphism is familiar. So you have one phenomena and another phenomena. They might have totally different names and processes, but then you can put one-to-one mapping into them and the functions are the same.
Is that something also that you can bring as a strength to the community? So seeing similarities, patterns, isomorphisms.
I hope so, but without the mathematics background of the people around me, how do I explain this concept of isomorphism? Because it's a sort of very precise mathematical concept, and in this case, there would be two sets of experiments that are quite different, and I think they are looking at the same phenomena.
Yeah.
But so I guess one would need to devise an experiment that's measuring both of them at the same time.
Is it something that you can use as your kind of secret skill that you don't necessarily explain it to anybody, but it shows up in your output because you are the one who saw the similarity, and then you propose a model or
Well, the thing is that the peers are biologists, so I have to adjust my communication skills
of
to
course,
them,
yeah.
and there's a big difference in biology publications and mathematics publications. So mathematics publication, it takes as many pages as your proof takes.
Yeah.
There is no, you can use 2,000 words and that's it.
In biology, like there are these kind of limits.
There are limits, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
have 4 figures and 4,000 words, or 4 figures and 2,000 words.
It's so universal. The limits are so.
It's so universal.
Wow, I never.
So it's very difficult to go into the deep.
Appendix.
They're starting to limit those numbers as well.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there used to be papers that had like 4 pages and then 8 pages appendix.
Right.
Or supplementary material,
Yeah.
but there starts to be limits on those as well.
Yeah, I am myself in robotics, where people are more familiar with mathematics. They know what's the isomorphism. So the communication barrier is much smaller. So how so I'm sure it's a very important part of your adjustment to the new world is this communication skills. How would you describe learning it? What kind of advice would you give to a mathematician who suddenly went to either your area or are you still hiring, by the way?
I just hired.
You hired?
Yeah.
Okay, congratulations.
Thanks.
He or she is a mathematician originally from?
No, we didn't, unfortunately. We tried to hire a mathematician or physicist, but
Yeah, I mean that position was I reposted it on LinkedIn at least once, maybe even twice, and I thought that that's an amazing opportunity to many. I would probably I would be interested, but I'm already like in my own
So this was a grant for data science on AI on this circadian clock data, linking to climate change and environmental impact.
So in your LinkedIn post, you wrote that we desperately need a person with strong mathematics background or something like this. We already covered a lot of the reasons. Is there some other reason why is it desperately needed?
Precise thinking skills.
Precise thinking skills. That's so amazing that it's a rare find. It's difficult to find.
And especially in the UK, children can stop studying mathematics at the age of 16. It's not compulsory until 18, which means that people who study biology, more often than not, they stop studying mathematics properly at the age of 16. Of course, university will have some courses, but it's a sort of practical level mathematics.
Yeah, it's not
then,
really proving.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, the same goes the other way around. If you study physics or mathematics at A level, which is the upper secondary school, you don't study biology. So having someone who's done both is quite rare.
Right. Did you do any biology seriously before the 2013 when?
So I did IB diploma myself, and I have a very unusual IB diploma because I did physics, chemistry, and biology, all 3 sciences, and mathematics and further mathematics. And the fact that I did chemistry and physics and biology has become extremely useful because there was some sort of decent background. Of course, I have not done university biology, and there are serious gaps in my biological knowledge of various kind of broad biology concepts. But the sort of evolutionary concepts and cell biology and other things I've learned by osmosis. And it is important to be immersed into a biology environment. So these sort of computational biology labs that are not next to the vet labs are much more difficult to get the background knowledge.
Vet labs?
Wet lab, people who are getting their hands wet with liquids and enzymes and such things. So dry lab is the computational, wet lab is the
So already some terminology that I'm not familiar with. Okay, so what is the easiest like if you had to single out certain, like, I don't know, a course or a book or something that would enable a mathematician to be open to this kind of position. So I guess programming, like even like basic programming course in Python, what do people use?
So there's actually, if you are interested in bioinformatics, in the internet there are these programming problems, and there's a set of problems in bioinformatics.
I know Euler project, but
yeah, this is called Rosamond.
Rosen. Oh, interesting. So if someone does a set of problems and put that in their CV, then that immediately kind of makes them more interesting as a prospect.
Yes, because it shows that you have done programming in these type of problems.
Right.
And they start from very, very basic and then get harder and harder.
Okay, that's very interesting.
I did those some 10 years ago or even longer ago. And then I got to a certain level and then I started working on real problems from the real world biology.
It's different because in mathematics, we're used to that you have to study at least for 2 years some area before you can actually contribute in a research level. But here, you basically learn programming for maybe several months and you already can contribute.
Yeah.
Is it something that was difficult for you to comprehend? Is there some kind of mathematical perfectionism that you're struggling with?
No, I mean, of course, there's a certain, like, it's very difficult to stop projects because I can always think that we could do this slightly better, we could do this slightly better, and this is not quite right yet. But then one has to learn the pragmatism that this is how far our data goes.
Right.
And one has to stop here.
Right.
But of course, in biology, I've worked in several different types of problems. So for instance, I've mentioned assembly problems, I mentioned the circadian problems. I've worked on RNA problems. So yesterday we posted a paper on the bioarchive about cell-to-cell communication of RNA, and we raised some doubts whether this phenomena is as big as it's thought to be.
As weak as it's thought to be, so it's more.
No, whether this phenomena is happening in the scale that people think it is.
Okay.
Because we discovered that lots of the annotated things were actually noise.
Interesting.
Which had been thought of being a signal. And in this, because I'm a mathematician and data scientist and think abstractly, it usually takes about a year to. Well, I can start contributing to a problem within weeks, but within a year, there's enough knowledge to write a paper, like enough new knowledge. And this is quite difficult for biologists to understand because they are studying their one system. And they go deeply in one system, and then there just comes this person who studies data. And well, data is data. So yeah, they have very fast publication tempo compared to mathematics. It is much faster, and it has its problems because if I get a paper to review, I have 2 weeks to review it, and there's no way I can do anything but say, oh, this is plausible. So in theory, all the data for papers is in public repositories, and I could take it and look at it, but you can't do it in 2 weeks. No, yeah. Especially that you are probably doing other work at the same time. You can just review and not do anything else. Okay, the difference between pure math and applied science is visible in particular in the number of citations. So in your pure mathematics publications, which are probably much more difficult intellectually, you have around 10 citations per paper, and your first, according to Google Scholar, your first paper in biology has 230 citations. So is that because, what would you say about that? It's a big jump. It is a big jump. So when people cite mathematics, they've actually read your paper. When they cite your biology paper, they've read the abstract.
Right, and it can be just that you introduced a method that other people are using, and so they are referring.
Yeah, or they are using the particular genome that you contributed to.
Or
like
some.
if they are using that, they have to cite it.
Right. Okay, so but it is an indication that you did something useful, something that people needed, and
not all biology papers have 200 citations, so 200 is pretty good.
Yeah, even in your that one of the top, right? Oh no, you have even 370 in a more recent paper, which means is
Yeah, I think the first biology paper was the ancient DNA. So it gets cited pretty much every time someone writes about European ancient DNA.
okay, because your paper is one of the only ones that
No,
deals.
because all of them get cited.
It's such a small area.
Well, the list of citations in a paper is easily 50, 60 papers.
Okay.
That my paper would cite. But if you look at the mathematics paper, the number of citations at the end might be 7.
Can be very small, yeah. So this area, it has a potential to have a very significant impact on global economy. This is you're involved in things that are solving problems for
Food security.
Food security. That's the biggest ethical and economical challenge. That so moving from pure mathematics, where people have a stigma even like against that, I want to a little bit like fight against the stigma of mathematicians that, oh, I don't want my math to be useful, the kind of hardy approach that, oh, number theory is beautiful just because it's pure. And then of course now we're using number theory in cryptography. So I want to ask at some point, are you thinking about moving to business world at some point? Like, have you been thinking of using some of your findings in building a business that could be billions of dollars?
So there have been a couple of times I've been chatting to startup companies about joining them as a consultant or joining them as a scientist. And I actually did a couple of months as a secondment on a biotech company online, writing them a business case on something related to plant sciences and genomics. And that was actually interesting because it's quite different world yet.
Yeah.
Much more fast moving. I'm pretty sure the business case was never considered and was just buried after this work quickly. But it was sort of finding information and putting it together and trying to sell it.
Right. Yeah.
And would this sort of platform work for customers? But I think for me, the kind of autonomy, intellectual autonomy, is a high value, which is possible in research world and not in business world.
If you start your own business, you're pretty independent.
That's true.
But of course, it has a very different set of constraints and many things are very different. Yeah.
But I should say that, of course, pure mathematics should exist, and it is still beautiful.
Yes.
It still has kind of, if I take an algebra book, or like if I just think about Galois theory, it is wonderful.
Of course, no question.
But I guess in my mind, pure mathematics is more like art. It's more like going to an art gallery or concert just for the pure sensual enjoyment.
Yeah, we need it.
And we do need it. And it does give useful thinking skills and the sort of seeing the right structures, like what might be the abstract structures in the world that are useful.
I like the metaphor of bodybuilding. Somebody who goes to the gym, you might spend 10 years as a bodybuilder just working on your muscles as a form of art. but then you're strong, and then you can apply your strengths elsewhere.
That's true.
Rami in his interview said that he feels like he's a retired athlete now that he's working in data science. Okay, wow. So this is all very inspiring. Let's see. I had other. Yeah. So on this topic, actually, do you miss working in pure mathematics yourself?
Not really. So I guess there are few people with whom communication was just wonderful. And this sort of standing in front of a blackboard, solving a problem was a nice feeling. And the sort of feeling of having completed something, that there is a proof and it's finished and this is true. And feeling that because it's in the paper and it's true, and then no one can question them because they can follow the logic and agree with me that this is true, and they agree with me. And in biology, because it's never fully, well, it's not logical sometimes, and people have opinions and strong hypotheses. Even if I have a proof that result or theory, there can still be attacks on it because opinions and different viewpoints come into the question, and I haven't done all the possible experiments in all possible ways. It's all incomplete.
And also the data is incomplete.
Yes.
People's opinions, but also the data itself can be noisy. And
there's also, they might have done 5 experiments that they haven't published that no one knows. And then they bring those, but in this experiment, we saw this and it's in conflict with that theory.
Right.
So the completeness, I guess I miss.
Yeah.
And the depth, because this 2,000 words, 4 pictures.
That is very interesting. I never heard that there would be such a rigid ruling in an entire area.
And there's this other idea that not even papers should be difficult. Like if you, like in mathematics, someone gives you Bourbaki, you know that it takes ages and you might not master it ever. I never mastered Bourbaki. There are just things that I can't do. But there is no one saying that this book should be made easier.
Yeah.
It is, you go there and you try it, and there are some people in the world who master this area of mathematics and they are revered, and that's fine. But in biology, it's assumed somehow that all biology should be intellectually accessible to everyone. And sometimes I feel that something is missing.
Yeah, it's a strange type of pressure that you have to take into account. It's kind of an extra burden, right? So, apart from thinking about the results, you have to also think about, how am I going to... But I understand it also, there's a marketing kind of dimension to it, that they want their papers to be also advertisements of what they've done, of the research group, of the professor.
Yeah. And the thing is that I once saw a paper where there was a one sentence planted there just to excite the press. And sure enough, that was the sentence that the press took. And it was there, an easy sentence, so that they can report the research.
Yeah.
And it made sense. I was puzzled about it at that time, but yeah, why not? It's better to have one sentence they can take rather than have it difficult and for them to choose something and put it slightly wrongly.
Yeah. Mathematics, if there is ever a popular article, then it was written for that purpose separately. You can't really expect a journalist to open papers from Annals of Mathematics and make an article without actually speaking to the mathematicians behind it.
Yeah, this paper was reported on the first page of BBC. news
Wow.
website. So
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I see that you're publishing in Nature, and it's like super high level stuff. In terms of at least journals. And what would you tell yourself 10 years ago, so 2014, or maybe let's say even earlier? What would you tell yourself about the world outside of pure mathematics?
be curious,
Good answer.
because curiosity does get you quite far. Just asking questions and figuring out what's there.
Anything else you would like to say about mathematicians in industry or in other areas?
So I still think mathematics is the queen of sciences. Of course, as a mathematician, it's easy for me to say and think that I'm on top of the food chain here, but it does give me a certain amount of confidence, and especially around biologists who sometimes are a bit iffy with their mathematics skills, that I have a doctorate in mathematics. I am a clever person. I can deal with this.
Do they respect it the same way? Does that, like, when you say you have a PhD in mathematics, do they take it seriously?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because it's not a doctorate in biology. And this is one of the reasons I went on to do the habilitation in plant genomics.
Interesting.
Because I did want to have a degree. And I was chatting with people in Helsinki asking whether I should have a PhD or habilitation. And they said, well, it's much easier to get habilitation. It's a matter of putting publications together and writing a research proposal and giving a demonstration lecture.
Yeah, and it looks very good on your record. I mean,
it's kind of final stamp that I am committed to being a biologist. Because of course there are suspicions like you are not a real biologist because you haven't done a degree in biology. But over 10 years of experience and a publication record will start to speak for itself.
Of course, yeah. And PhD typically is around 4 publications, and you certainly are past that. So.
And I'm also currently the handling editor of a biology journal. And that for me is a feeling that I'm a biologist. I'm reading these biology papers
and they trust you to make
decisions about those and the quality of papers.
What are biology conferences like, the ones that you go to?
They are totally different from maths conferences. So first of all, some biology conferences are huge. So I went to San Diego in January to a conference which was nearly 3,000 people.
Wow.
It's the Plant and Animal Genomics Conference. And I gave a talk, and there were probably 17 parallel sessions at that time. The talks go on from 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. and my talk was about 7:30 in the evening. So there was a very small selected group present at that point.
Right.
So there were probably about 30 people on my talk.
30. Which is probably more.
Which is a good number for mathematics conference.
Just to put it in perspective, I think a typical conference in a narrow area in mathematics is maybe 30 people.
Yeah.
Because the biggest math conference I was in was probably the European Congress of Mathematicians, and it had several hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So that European Congress meaning all areas of mathematics, all of Europe and maybe a little bit outside, and it had less than 1,000 people. And it was, in my mind, it was huge. And now this was 3,000 people, which is really, it's a completely different event. I just recently was actually in a philosophy conference, very similar to mathematics, very small group of people who are all kind of working on the same type of questions. And it's an intimate feeling. It's like a family.
Yeah.
Everyone knows each other. They read each other's work for a long time. They're commenting on each other's work. In philosophy, they're also debating all the time, unlike in mathematics, because in mathematics, everything is true or false, and that's it. Nobody can argue.
Yeah, but then I went also for a small local conference in the UK, which was about 30 people, 40 people, which had this feeling of everyone working on the same area. And
okay, so that also exists.
That also exists.
In a narrow area.
But in general, conferences are much bigger. And then because I work in many different areas of biology, because I can work with data, it's difficult to actually, I haven't figured out yet which other conferences I should go to. Because there might be a paper on plant signaling I've published, but then there might be a paper on plant genomes, or there might be a paper on circadian clock, and they all have different conferences. So for instance, circadian clock conference was maybe about 300 people, but then you have people working on human circadian clock, animal circadian clock, you have people working on some how birds are disturbed by artificial light at night, and how amphibians in some place are lunar cyclic, and how like the breadth of stuff is just amazing.
There is a mathematical theory about synchronization of these kind of rhythms. I forget what it's called, but the idea in that theory is that if you have many neurons or other things that synchronously vibrate, but they are communicating. So, like, let's say they're trying to move towards each other, then eventually they will synchronize. An example is when people are clapping in a big theater hall, and if everyone wants, they can synchronize without a leader. Somehow everyone is listening to their surrounding people, and then they kind of match to them, and then everyone synchronizes. Just crossed my mind.
But that is interesting, because a human will have a part in their brain that orchestrates the whole circadian clock in your body, while plants don't.
Okay.
So plants are in this situation of clapping in the theater.
Interesting.
And every cell does its thing, but then they synchronize. It's sort of distributed system.
I heard about a bug, you know, these glowing insects.
Fireflies.
Fireflies, exactly. And sometimes they start synchronizing. So they all sit in a big tree, and they start synchronizing because they want to attract females. And if they just randomly fire, then the females who are far away will not see them. And when they synchronize, the entire tree flashes. Then it's visible from far away. And that is an example where there is no centralized coordination. This is very interesting. Yeah, plants don't have brains, so they must
be distributed.
Everything is distributed.
I mean, plants are absolutely fascinating in the sense, for instance, when does it know when to flower?
Right.
And when does it, like, let's grow another leaf here, another leaf there?
Do you think plants could potentially develop intelligence?
The thing is, maybe they are intelligent. We are not just able to communicate with them.
Okay.
I mean, of course, they have incredibly fascinating sensory mechanism. Like all the nucleustic movement, like sunflowers following the sun.
Right.
It's all controlled. And then if you are a plant, you are a sessile organism, you are stuck to the place where you are. So if it's hot, you have to protect yourself against drought and sunlight. And then in Finland, you have to protect yourself against freezing. And there's the birch tree that's just this growing and ability to evaporate, control that, and grow when it's needing to grow. And
all these things you're saying are related to movement or growth somehow, which is consistent with what I'm thinking. So, which would be if there's some people like there's like a new wave of embodied cognitive science saying that all intelligence is embodied, and one of the kind of corollaries is that movement is necessary for intelligence, which is why nervous systems are usually only found in animals that move and not in plants which stay. But there is a lot of movement in plants, like you just said, growth, turning.
And for instance, plants can sense gravity.
Right, they have to, like they have to grow
Yeah.
down the roots and
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is fascinating. Okay, great. I think we covered a lot of things. We can wrap up. So, anything else you would like to add?
Well, thank you for an
Thank
interesting
you.
discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. This was Pirita Paajanen, and yeah, all the notes are going to be linked in the description. So, have a good day.